You must have wondered what's the difference between two very similar terminologies. For example, the minor Isma and the greater Isma. Whenever we speak about Islamic theology, especially when it comes to Shia theology, we come across this notion of Isma or immaculateness. In English, it is mistranslated as infallibility, and I shall mention why such a translation is incorrect later on. Mainstream Shia theology teaches that not only were the 124,000 prophets immaculate, were they given Isma from God, but also the 12 Imams which came after our final prophet, as well as his daughter and the only lady to be given Isma, Fatima alayhi salam. This Isma that Allah gives to these individuals is a clear understanding of what is right and wrong, what will bring about His pleasure over His displeasure. And because of the clarity that they have whenever they approach an action or even an intention, they do not err or slip, they do not sin, and they do not go outside the boundaries of the law which Allah has given to you and I. It's important to address very briefly two questions. This Isma or protection or immaculateness which is given to the prophets, the Imams and Lady Fatima, was it acquired because of an action that they did? Did they achieve a station in their lives after which God gave them this Isma? Or was it given to them from the onset? Was it within their being? And secondly, if somebody has this protection and clarity, does that mean that they become robotic, or do they still have free will to act in accordance with the pleasure of God or choose the displeasure of God? Mainstream Shia theology teaches us that this was not something that they had to acquire after certain struggles in their life. Rather, it was a protection that God gave them from the onset so that they could complete their mission. Had the Prophet not been immaculate at the onset of his life, people would have judged him because of this and would have doubted him even after the revelation came. But because people never saw him flaunt the law of God, never saw him do something immoral from the onset, they had no argument against him when revelation came about. With regards to free will, we realize that if these individuals were robotic, if they had no free will to accept and do good or to reject and do evil, then these individuals would be like angels. They would not be an example for you and I. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran that the Prophet is the best of examples. He can't be an example for me if I can't relate to him. I can relate to him. He had free will and so do I. But he chose to do good, and therefore I too need to choose to do good. He had temptations, just like you and I have temptations. He had anger within him, he had desires within him, but he was able to control them and use them only for the sake of God. Hence, he can become an example for us today. Finally, it's important to note that you and I, as individuals who have not been given this Isma from the onset of our birth, cannot achieve this type of Isma. There is a type of Isma which we can achieve. I shall mention it shortly. But this type of Isma is not one we can achieve. At the beginning, I mentioned to you that the translation in English of Isma being infallibility is incorrect. And this is the reason why. If you look in the English dictionary, infallibility means the inability to commit sin. Therefore, free will is taken away from them. But here we say that the prophets, the Imams and Lady Fatima had the ability but never did. That makes them much greater beings than somebody who's a robot and never had the ability to commit sin in the first place. Next, I'd like to mention about individuals who we look up upon, individuals who we take as our role models, people like Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam and Abul Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam. These are people who, when we look at their history, we don't find them ever having committed sins. We don't find these individuals stepping outside the boundary of the Sharia. Were these people also individuals who had been given Isma from the onset? Or did they acquire it over time? And did they have free will or not? We can answer this very simply. That for the rest of us, we have the ability to acquire Isma. We have the ability through our actions, through our piety, to being individuals who are wary of God's presence throughout every moment of our time. We too can achieve a station where clarity is given to us of right and wrong, evil and good, morality and immorality. Such clarity that we shall never take a stance which will bring about the displeasure of God. That's what these individuals did. From the onset, they were brought up in these beautiful, holy households, which gave them piety, which taught them about God from the onset, and that's why they acquired this station of Isma very early on. An acquired Isma with free will is a station that every individual can achieve.